This is The Naked Life with Roxanne Noor. Hello, guys. Today's episode, I really want to be about the necessity of media literacy and the way in which we are indoctrinated by information and the way in which we can actually somehow manage it and control it by understanding the way in which media itself works. So because we're in this internet age, everyone has some kind of platform. There is a colossal amount of information. And many of the people speaking the loudest are absolute bullshit. I want to say that the first lesson in media literacy is to not confuse the message with the messenger. So basically, because there's Instagram, Twitter, where people who are not experts can have a social platform to spew out whatever information they want, many of these people have the biggest personas. So they will say things in a way in which it's charismatic, it's confident. A lot will use pseudo-intellectual language. They will have this persona that demands attention. And the best thing to do when listening to people speak on social media itself is to focus on the content. So do not focus on the persona or the way in which it is said, but focus on the content itself. A lot of the time, the content is a really simple slogan, something that is easily digestible, and it's honestly easy to be seduced by it because it takes something that's complex and it makes it easy for you to understand, giving you a sense of having information which might not be correct. And a lot of people working in public relations know the use of slogans. So an example I can give is support our troops. So this is one slogan that in America we've heard time and time again. Noam Chomsky talks about this in his book Media Control, which I all really recommend to you. So what he says is, support our troops is that they don't mean anything. They mean as much as whether you support the people in Iowa. Of course, there's an issue. The issue was, do you support our policy? But you don't want people to think about that issue. That's the whole point of good propaganda. You want to create a slogan that nobody's going to be against and everybody's going to be for. Nobody knows what it means because it doesn't mean anything. Its crucial value is that it diverts your attention from a question that does mean something. Do you support our policy? End quote. So basically what Noam Chomsky is saying here is, especially what we see in political rhetoric, is that it is purposefully vague. It says these kind of grand, big, general statements, and there's no definitive message in it. So basically saying support our troops, okay, what exactly does that mean? Of course, we all want to support our homeland, our country. We want to not be invaded. We want to defend, we want to protect, we want to preserve land. But support our troops, what does it mean? Does that mean we're okay with spending $877 billion a year on military when we don't have affordable healthcare or education? Because no. So what policy does a slogan support? When you see someone on social media saying really big, grand statements that kind of sound nice, what does it actually mean? What does the content actually mean? So we are trying to stay away just from the way people say things. We're trying to focus on the central message itself. So this is the way that people reel others in, is they have an allure, they have charisma, they say things that are actually quite general. Maybe they say it in a beautiful way, but when you think about the message is too vague to make proper sense. So that would be one of the first lessons in media literacy, which Noam Chomsky talks a lot about. Another would be to really beware of sound bites. So sound bites are these reductions of information, and this is literally the most anti-intellectual thing one can do to learn. You cannot learn something in a 20-second soundbite. All information in the world, from science to wildlife to business, is multifactored. It is innately complex. Please be wary of people who reduce and simplify complex issues. To really know truth, all of us have to be dedicated to, in a way, hard work, which is reading independent articles, which is watching documentaries, which is speaking to the people in countries that are being affected by certain things. It is not just regurgitating the sound bites we hear. We want to speak to people who actually know about policies. We want to do in-depth research. And the opposite of that is believing everything that happens to us on the internet. And in this way, in the not believing, in being analytical, you have to maybe be okay with being outcasted sometimes. Noam Chomsky also says, quote, "As long as people are marginalized and distracted and have no way to organize or articulate their sentiments, or even know that others may have these sentiments, people who said that they prefer social spending to military spending, who gave that answer on polls, as people actually did, assume that they were the only people with that crazy idea in their heads. They never heard it from anyone else. Nobody's supposed to think that. Therefore, if you do think it and you answer it in a poll, you just assume you're sort of weird. So since there's no way to get together with other people who share or reinforce that view and help you articulate it, you feel then like an oddity." And this will happen a lot, is this divergence from a lot of mainstream propaganda, because when you look at it, it is a lot of fear mongering, it is a lot of polarization, it is a lot of reductionism, and being involved in research, being involved in talking to people from different countries, being involved in nuance instead of just simplification is going to put you out of the box of common thought. And you're going to think you're odd, you're going to think you're outcasted. But it will be okay, because there will be a feeling that you are on the path to something more real. And another thing, in the sense of wanting to be a part of something more real, is eradicating what is not real. And we can say, I think we can all agree, that there's a really heavy, purposeful extremism. And what we want to do is we want to filter through that kind of content. One example of this would be Vice. Vice is bankrupt, probably for a reason, because it's not real news. And basically what they did was they used extremism all the way to their advantage with clickbait and with content that was all in all completely not meaningful. Ryan Holiday actually talks about this. He wrote a book called Believe Me, I'm Lying, which talks about the way in which media is consistently lying to us. And he says, "The more unbelievable headlines and articles readers are exposed to, the more it warps their compass, making the real seem fake and the fake seem real. The more extreme a headline, the longer participants spend processing it, and the more likely they are to believe it. The more times an unbelievable claim is seen, the more likely they are to believe it. And so we are just constantly fed this extremism, and the best thing we can do is actually tune out. Yeah, to not even look at it, to scroll past it, to give it no attention, because that is the biggest tool we have, is our own attention. What do we choose to give our focus to? And if it's to things that are not real, are not feeding the human spirit, are polarizing us, are all extreme, are not based on truth, then we're feeding into that narrative and it becomes our reality. Another thing, especially feeding into the extremism that we're constantly seeing, or the feeling that there's constantly something wrong in the world, whether it's war or rape, all these things exist, but we're being fed with it consistently. And what we need to see is the way in which our feelings are being manipulated. One of the main things in media literacy is to notice when you are being coerced into feeling. And notice especially when it's that coercion through fear. So fear is the primary tactic to control. And the most common way a nation installs fear is by having a common enemy. And it's really important to notice when media is demonizing a whole population, a whole group, a whole ethnicity. And to notice the way in which fear is being used as a really elegant weapon. So basically, when we're in a state of fear, we are paralyzed by it. We can't think for ourselves. And this completely takes us out of empowerment. I will quote Chomsky one more time. Unless they're properly scared and frightened of all kinds of devils that are going to destroy them from outside or inside or somewhere, they may start to think, which is very dangerous because they're not competent to think. And so this is what media does a lot, is it does the thinking for us. It's curating a message and feeding us that message. And it's easier to feed someone a message when that person is in fear, because what you're trying to do is you are feeding them then a solution that you yourself have created. And so this is being done to us all the time. And one of the most important things we can do for our sense of sovereignty is to remain in neutrality, which is really difficult because the things that are going viral the most are things that are feeding collective anger. And when we can stay in this place instead of being angry or fearful or in judgment of just neutrality, we are less easy to control. We are in our center, we are in our power. And these machines are made to control emotion. And when we're in this place of equilibrium, of looking at things that are sad, that are distasteful, that are horrid, but we are just in this state of just seeing it, it changes everything because we won't be coerced and pressured by external entities to feel. And also, when we're speaking about control in general, one of the easiest ways in which we are controlled is not seeing who is actually running the show, who is the one orchestrating things, who is the person behind the scenes. And we think of media as just information, but it's way more than that. It's really important to note that media is a corporate entity. It's owned by mega corporations that have private interests. And what keeps them functioning isn't just the audience, but it's advertisers. And they owe it to their advertisers to have you hooked in. So because media is a corporate entity, they don't have morality. No entities have morality that are in the corporate sphere because their job is to create profit. It is amoral, and people, individuals, are the ones that have morality. So then it's our job to challenge narratives that are dangerous or untrue. But this is really difficult, and it's difficult because of the fact that anyone who is critical or analyzing is often vilified or censored or deplatformed. And Noam Chomsky talks about this and he calls it flack. So flack would be the people that are critical and then kind of ostracized or censored or basically silenced. And we see this all the time, from politics to media, is the easiest way to kill a revolutionary idea is to kill the leader of that idea. And the CIA knew this when Martin Luther King Jr. was on the most wanted list. Throw him in jail, make him silent. The modern day killing now is forcing silence through censorship, through platforming the person, through defamation, through delegitimizing them. And this censorship is absolutely everywhere. And another example of this, a good way to look at it in the political sphere, is taking an example like Cuba. So the US had put sanctions on them. They were isolated from the rest of the global economy. We did it in the name of a pseudo-democracy. And Israel would have done the same exact thing, or they are doing the same exact thing with Palestine. Even if Palestine could be free, it would be colossally scary for them because they are so heavily isolated from the rest of the world, which means that there's no economy, which means that their voices are often silenced, they're not heard. And governments and media really know this, that when you isolate a thing or a person, that thing dies. And what we need most is actually to listen to things that aren't just feeding into mainstream narratives. And a lot of this information is really deeply, purposefully hidden from us. This goes into our concepts also of freedom of speech, that freedom of speech means hearing everybody. It's not just the people you agree with. So if you believe in freedom of speech, you believe in it even for your enemy. You believe in it even for the people that you can say you disagree with. And someone who wants to become conscious, someone who wants to be on the path of truth, knows that disagreements are functional. They are there for a purpose, to provoke thought in a direction towards understanding rather than polarization. And Napoleon famously said, divide and conquer. The easiest way to do that is to pit the people against the people in ideology. Ideology is the main thing that is dividing us. When we look inward, almost all of us want the same thing. We want peace. We want safety for our children. We want clean air and water. But the methods in which we take to get there differ, and that's okay. And what we need in freedom of speech is freedom of speech for everybody. And so taking all these messages together, the way we become literate in media is that we are not fooled by sound bites. We know that it's not a real source of information. We do our own research. We go and we examine the content instead of being persuaded by the big charismatic persona of a person. We look even at the way in which language manipulates us. An example of this is wording. So for example, when we're talking about war, calling a group casualties, so there were 2,000 casualties, versus saying there were 2,000 innocent dead civilians. When we say casualties, it dehumanizes, it numbs. When we say 2,000 innocent dead civilians, it provokes emotion. We have to really witness the way in which language coerces us, is suggestive, is trying to feed us a bias just in the wording. And journalists know when they're doing this all the time. They ask questions that are already suggestive in the direction of their own opinion instead of questioning in a way of neutrality. And so when we're receiving stuff like this, we have to be in the seat of neutrality, in the seat of observation, in the seat of not getting pushed and pulled by what others want us to believe. And it's a beautiful thing to be in that state of sovereignty. Allow yourself then to be okay with not fully knowing, to not get lost in righteousness, but to allow yourself to keep digging rather than just coming to really quick answers from other people. There's a philosopher and journalist named Chris Hedges, and he wrote, quote, "In an age of images and entertainment, in an age of instant emotional gratification, We neither seek nor want honesty or reality. Reality is complicated. Reality is boring. We are incapable or unwilling to handle its confusion. And this goes into what I was saying before about not being reductionistic. We have to be okay with the fact that there is so much information out there. There is so much confusion. There's so much that we have to be humble enough to say that we don't know the answers, but to keep seeking, to keep asking the hard questions, to keep having these dialogues, to have dialogues with people who are different from us, to not get lost in ideology and have it weaponized against us, turned against our own families, turned against our own nation, turned against people with different skin than us, but to really come back to our essential state of humanity, to come back to witness consciousness, and to see that media is there to provide us with information, but what we're going through right now is a collective numbing. There's so much information, we're becoming numb to our humanity. There is so much information that we are beginning to not go to each other, but to go only to the internet. And so really, I invite you to look at your own human experience and to use it and to allow media to be something that you're extremely careful in, and to know that what you consume feeds your mind, and the psyche is really a fragile thing. And so we want to treat it with care, treat ourselves with care, treat others with care. And that comes from a state of being literate in not only the media, but in our own emotions, in our own state of being. So I hope this helped you guys today. And yeah, I would really recommend reading Noam Chomsky. He has hundreds of books and he says really profound things about media. He also just released a masterclass, which was really beautiful. So thank you, and until next time.